New Horizons has been exploring Pluto for years. The probe arrived there back in 2016, and since then it has been snapping photos and collecting data from the dwarf planet and its moons. But now it seems that some scientists are using this probe to solve a mystery that is not even on Pluto. You see, New Horizons took these incredible pictures of Saturn's rings in 1980, but here's the thing, they aren't flat. If we zoom in on the spokes of the rings, we can see that they warp and bend, and there are also some small gaps within the rings themselves. This puzzled scientists for decades because it didn't make sense how these warps could have formed. Now though, researchers think that they may finally have an answer thanks to some features on Pluto. Now to understand what's going on, let's get a bit closer to Saturn. Saturn's rings are made up of ice particles that range in size from millimeters to meters across. These pieces of debris orbit Saturn and reflect light back towards Earth. That is what makes the rings visible in the first place. They are basically just giant disco balls floating around the planet. Although Saturn's rings are incredibly pretty, they're actually only about 200 meters wide and are almost transparent. We can see through them like you can see through a sheet of paper. And because of their thinness, scientists think that Saturn's rings must be smooth and flat, or at least as flat as possible. Ice particles should move freely across the rings and collide with each other. That would prevent any sort of large-scale structure from forming. It's why when you watch videos of Saturn's rings, they look so still. However, New Horizons showed us that things aren't entirely smooth. There are tiny gaps and ripples within the rings, so how did this happen? Well, one theory is that something massive passed by and knocked the particles out of whack. Scientists wondered if an icy moonlet, something like Saturn's moon Dione, had swung by and stirred up the rings. Unfortunately, all of the moons in Saturn's system were accounted for at the time, so this theory was never able to gain much traction. Another theory is that a comet passed through the rings and left behind a scar that stayed there for billions of years. In fact, we know that comets have hit Saturn's rings before. Back in 2004, NASA's Cassini probe caught this image of an actual comet leaving a scar on the rings. Scientists figured that the comet must have vaporized almost immediately after hitting the rings because Saturn doesn't have an atmosphere that comets need to survive. But here's where things start to get interesting. Remember the picture that New Horizons took that we showed you at the beginning of this video? Well, scientists say that it might not actually show a comet's impact. Instead, it might be showing an impact from something a lot smaller, but there's still plenty of stuff out there that's smaller than a comet. And in our increasingly polluted world, it's more important than ever to protect our bodies against viruses and other nasties. And now let's get back to Saturn. As New Horizons approached Pluto, the probe's cameras captured a series of images of Pluto's surface. One of the most striking features that they revealed was a vast, mysterious plain called Sputnik Planitia. The smooth, uncratered surface indicated that the region was geologically young. Scientists think that Sputnik Planitia was created by a massive event early in Pluto's history. In fact, craters can tell us the age of a planetary surface. If a surface is heavily cratered, it means that it's old. Bombardment from space has had a lot of time to leave its mark. On the other hand, a surface without craters means that it's relatively new and has yet to be bombarded. But Sputnik Planitia wasn't just smooth. The plane had strange, mysterious lines running across it. These lines turned out to be enormous cracks in the icy surface. And that raised another question. Why aren't these cracks filled with dirt or ice? You see, when you break the crust of an icy body, the frigid liquid below will rush in to fill the cracks. That's why the bottoms of glaciers are often smooth, featureless plains. But the cracks on Pluto were deep and so wide that gravity couldn't hold anything back. It was like a giant set of dominoes. Once one fell over, everything else fell with it. This created a domino effect that extended all the way across Sputnik Planitia. Eventually, the entire surface collapsed into huge troughs. Now, this might seem like a problem for Pluto, but it isn't. As long as there's enough pressure keeping the ice frozen, Pluto is fine. But when it comes to Saturn's rings, things don't collapse very easily. Ice just crumbles instead. If a piece of ice loses its structural integrity, it breaks into smaller pieces. Those pieces then become part of the ring and eventually orbit Saturn. For decades, scientists have been puzzled by the patterns of some of Saturn's rings. How could they stay stable for millions or billions of years? Couldn't they just crumble forever? Well, according to some researchers, they actually do. In a 2023 study, a team of researchers proposed that Saturn's rings aren't static structures. Instead, they are actively collapsing and reforming. The gaps and ripples that we see in the rings today were left behind by meteors or comets that broke apart small pieces of ice. These ice crystals became part of the ring and continued orbiting Saturn. However, at some point, they lost their shape and simply crumbled. That's why the ripples remain in the rings today. It's kind of like dropping pebbles into a pond. Each rock is unique, but they all share some common ripples. So, could this explain the ripples seen in Saturn's rings? Well, maybe. After all, Saturn's rings are incredibly similar to Pluto's surface. Both are made of ice and both are peppered with little holes. Scientists believe that Pluto once had a second moon named Charon. Long ago, something huge smashed into Pluto, and that sent the icy debris crashing down onto its surface. What happens on Pluto might be happening on Saturn. Comets or meteors continuously smash into Saturn's rings. When this happens, the ice crumbles, revealing the black gases that lurk beneath the surface. Scientists saw something similar on Jupiter's moon Europa. Its surface has a bunch of strange red spots, and those spots form whenever a piece of ice loses its reflective properties. When the top layer of ice cracks, a black slushy from below rushes in to fill the gap. So it seems like Saturn's rings are a lot more dynamic than we thought. They aren't static structures stuck in time. Instead, they are constantly changing, collapsing, and reshaping themselves over the course of billions of years. Of course, scientists still have questions. For example, how big were the impacts that left these ripples in the first place? Were they made by a single large comet or by countless smaller rocks? Until we can find the answers, Saturn's rings will continue to be a source of fascination. Saturn's rings are truly amazing. I mean, who wouldn't want to visit such a beautiful place? But I probably wouldn't go anytime soon. Scientists think that the radiation levels near Saturn are absolutely insane. We're talking thousands of times higher than the lethal dose. It turns out that Saturn's magnetic field is so strong that it traps high-energy particles. And this creates a massive bubble of radiation all around the planet. Radiation sickness would be the least of your worries. You'd probably explode from the amount of energy coursing through your body.